We are about to start our second workshop. This workshop is about family medicine curriculum and training models. Kindly take your seats so that we can start immediately. So this working session, we have chair for this session is Vice Chancellor Professor Umar. He's a bit late. He's going to join us a little bit later in a few minutes. So the workshop session will be the same as the first workshop. We'll invite the panelists on the stage, and then I'll introduce them one by one. And then in this workshop, we have two speakers. And at the end of both talks, there will be Q&A sessions. We already have some sessions from our pre-conference online questions, and then we'll have students will go around the rows, and they will ask attendees to write some questions. So our first panelist is Professor Saima Iqbal. Dr. Saima Iqbal is professor and head of Department Family Medicine, Shafa College of Medicine, Shafa Tamir Millat University. Dr. Saima graduated from Aga Khan University in 1997 and went on to complete her training in family medicine in 2002, and she received her fellowship and complete her training in family medicine, and then she joined Shafa College of Medicine in 2005. She has authored several publications related to family medicine, bioethics, and medical education. Please welcome Dr. Saima Iqbal. Our second panelist for this workshop is Dr. Unab Khan. Dr. Unab Khan is a diplomate of American Board of Family Medicine and Adolescent Medicine. She is Associate Professor and Chair of Department of Family Medicine at Aga Khan University. She is the Chair of Department of Family Medicine at Aga Khan University. After graduating from AKU, she completed her primary residency in family medicine and fellowship in adolescent medicine in the US. And she is board certified in both specialties by the American Board of Education, Board of Family Medicine, and Pediatrics. She has also masters in clinical research and at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. She returned to Pakistan in 2017, and she joined Aga Khan University, and she is she joined Faculty of Family Medicine. She is a Faculty of Medicine of CPSP, and together with her team, she has started FemMed Essentials, a one-year blended course in family medicine to train GPs to be more efficient in their training and to be more helpful to their patients. I welcome Dr. Unab Khan to the stage, please. Our third panelist is Dr. Saira Afzal. She is Dean of Public Health and Preventive Medicine, Director of Foreign Affairs, Chairperson and Head of Department of Community Medicine, Editor Annals of King Edward's Medical University. Dr. Saira Afzal is Chairperson and Head of Department of Community Medicine, Faculty of Public Health in King Edward Medical University. Dr. Saira has published almost more than 70 research articles, and her research interests include primary health care, epidemiology, preventive medicine, health education, curriculum development, environmental health, medical education, occupational health, maternal and child health. Please welcome Dr. Saira Afzal. Is Professor Umar here, or? So now our panelists are here. I'll invite our speakers. Let me organize my pages. Okay. So our first speaker is Dr. Noreen Rafiq. Her talk is U.S. model of training of family physicians. Dr. Noreen Rafiq she's a family medicine program director at Carrington University, USA. Dr. Rafiq is an associate professor, core faculty, and curriculum director at the Department of Family Medicine Residency Program, Carrington University School of Medicine in Omaha. She is the author of many publications in family medicine, journals, textbooks, and quick consult books. She is also the course director of Department of Family Medicine Conference Primary Care Update, which is a two-day conference encompassing wide variety of topics related to specialty of family medicine. Please welcome Dr. Noreen Rafiq.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, thank you very much for including me into this great effort. I'm very delighted to be here. I'm a proud Campbellian and delighted to be in RMU. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, a little bit about me. I live in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm from Lahore, Pakistan. On the left side is the Creighton School of Medicine. On the right side is the residency clinic and the hospital I work at. Can I have the next slide, please? So we have been talking about family medicine definition since morning. To me, I can summarize it in two words: cura personalis. It's the care of whole person. You take care of their acute needs, you take care of their chronic needs, and you take care of their preventive needs, along with their emotional needs. So when you take care of the whole person, that is family medicine. Why are we talking about it? Why is it so important? There was actually a study done which was actually published in Harvard-Stanford collaboration, and that study showed that if you give 10 family physicians for 100,000 population, you will be able to increase the life expectancy to 250% as compared to giving 10 specialists to 100,000 people. So just imagine how much difference 10 family physicians can make. So that's why it's extremely important that we need to talk about it and get this established. Family physicians typically in US complete 3 to 4 years of residency. Majority of the programs are 3 years. 4 years are the program. If someone wants to do surgical obstetrics, then those programs are 4 years. So this is a general. Anyone who's a graduate of medical school has to go through 3 to 4 years of clinical rotations. Some basic mandatory requirements. Every single resident after 3 years has to have seen minimum of 1650 patients. That's minimum. They can see more, but this is the number that is required. These are the patients which are their continuity patients. These are the patients that they see regularly, on a regular basis. You have a diabetic patient, you do their A1C, you have them come back in 3 to 6 months, their visit is considered a visit. So these are their continuity patients. They have to have at least 10% of geriatric patients. They have to document that they have seen patients who are more than 65 years old, at least 165 of them. Similarly, pediatric patients less than 9 years old, at least 10% of those patients. For obstetrics, each program develops their own requirement. Some programs say we would like you to have at least 100 deliveries before we can say that yes, you are competent enough to deliver a patient on your own. Some programs say, well, it's fine, you can do 40 deliveries and you should be all right. But every single program has to have at least 10 continuity obstetric patients, means you start their care once they have a positive pregnancy test until they deliver and postpartum care. And their competency is based on the faculty who's precepting, and let them know, yes, this resident is competent to deliver a patient on their own. Home visits, very important. They need to see a geriatric patient and a younger patient, see their home and see what are the reasons why this patient is not able to do well. Critical care, at least 15 patients, and that happens when they go to either ICU or even on the floor if a patient gets critically sick, considered as a critical visit. Procedures, every program has a minimum of 10 procedures, but it is up to the program to determine what kind of procedures these residents need. For example, in my own program where I practice, they have circumcision as the required procedure, they have intraarticular injections as the required procedure, they have pap smear as a required procedure, and so on and so forth. So program will determine their own needs and get the residents competent in the procedures that they feel appropriate. Now coming on to training, there are 6 basic medical areas where family medicine resident would work. Pediatrics, obstetrics and gyne, internal medicine, as you can see, I have broken it down into endocrine, renal, cardio, pulm, ICU, rheumatology, neurology, dermatology, psych, surgery, in which they will do general surgery as well as trauma, and community medicine or public health. So these are the basic 6 core that they have to do. In addition to this, they will end up doing geriatrics. They may have a rotation in a nursing home. Here, the nursing homes are not very common, but things can be tweaked, or you can do home visits, but geriatric is important. Emergency medicine, residents rotate in ER and see how emergency medicine is being done. Ophthalmology, radiology, orthopedics, ENT, and urology. So these are not mandatory, but programs look at the requirement and can add this to their curriculum. Inpatient training is of 2 kinds in family medicine. One, which is by the Department of Family Medicine. A family medicine faculty will admit their own patients, and family medicine will go and see those patients and present to their faculty. This service is done throughout the year, and family medicine residents rotate in that rotation. The other inpatient training is when they are on cardiology or pulmonology, so they are working with specialty services and they are running their service. So they are learning how inpatient cardiology is done while in the hospital. So 2 kinds of inpatient training is done, one in the program and one with the specialties. So the outpatient training is literally the bread and butter of family medicine. Very, very important. Every single residency program has their outpatient rotation, which means that a first-year resident will have at least 1 half day of clinic every week. Second year will have 2 half days of clinic every week, and the third year will have 3 half days of clinic every week. In this half day of clinic, they will see only their own patients. The patients are not scheduled under Dr. Rafiq. The patients are scheduled under the resident, and the resident sees that patient and comes and precepts with me and says, patient came in with sore throat, I did this, I would like to get a strep test done. I approve, I make amendments, or do whatever. We have a discussion, we have a little bit of academic thing there, and they go ahead and manage that patient. But the patient identifies the resident as their doctor. As I said, this is considered as a continuity clinic. This continuity clinic will have all the patients, from prenatal care to peds, to adult medicine, to geriatrics. All those patients are scheduled with the resident and they do their clinic. In addition to their continuity clinic, when the residents are rotating in other specialties like general surgery or internal medicine, general surgery or specialty internal medicine, they may end up going to their clinic as well and do their clinic. If they are on OB-GYN, L&D, they may go and do an OB clinic. So in addition to their own clinic, which is never stopped no matter which rotation they are in, they will also go to other rotations and do their clinic as well. So there's tons and tons of stress on the outpatient clinic. The very important part of US training is didactics, the lectures. Different residency programs do different kinds of rotations. My own residency program has Friday half day. All the residents have the protected time. This is their protected time. They cannot take call. They do not hold pagers. They do not do any clinical work. They just come and attend those lectures. So these are done throughout the year, no matter what rotation they are in. They will have to have those half day of lectures. Some residency programs, if they don't have a half day of lectures, what they'll do is they'll make residents do lunch lectures. 12 to 1, all of them have lunches. So they'll have some kind of lectures set up for 12 to 1. So all week long, they're going to do those lectures. Residents not only attend family medicine didactics that we create for them, but when they are in cardiology or pulmonology or gastroenterology, all different specialties have their own didactics, and we highly encourage them to attend those lectures as well, because when you're there and you're just listening to all GI stuff, you'll obviously learn way more. ACLS, BLS, I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar, which is the advanced cardiac life support, basic life support, advanced life support for obstetrics, M&M, Journal Club, and Grand Rounds. These are mandatory requirements for all the residents without which they cannot graduate the program. Evaluations is an extremely important part of the training in US model of residency. Evaluations are done at multiple levels. The most important ones, the ACGME 6 clinical competencies, and I was hearing that the RMU has kind of incorporated that. It's good news to hear. So 6 clinical competencies, extremely important. There are multiple other kinds like milestones in which they compare our resident at the time of residency with their colleagues and see where they are in their training. So that one face-to-face, usually done by the faculty and the program director. Quarterly advisor, also if I'm the advisor, I will meet my resident every quarterly and do their evaluations. Semi-annual program director evaluations. So there are multiple layers of evaluations. The evaluations are not just for the resident ends up evaluating us as well. So very important, I need to know if I'm doing a good job, if I need to improve how I teach. So evaluations are what they are these days calling a 360 degrees evaluations. So even the nurses they are working with, they are evaluating the residents and the residents are evaluating the nurses. So faculty, nurses, residents, any staff, front desk staff, they are, everybody is evaluating each other. This is called 360 degree evaluations, which are again a very important part of the training in US. Academic evaluation in the residency program is basically the in-training exam that is given to all first years, second years, and third years. And after the end of the residency, then you end up taking the boards. So these are the two big kind of academic evaluations. Now, we know that majority of the programs, if you have taken an in-training exam and you have not done well, your score can be put against how you would perform in a board exam. Then at that time, the programs have remediation programs. So they'll make you do questions, they'll make you read articles, and you have to report to the program director so that he or she is aware that you're doing a good job. A little bit on the regulatory bodies. This is not part of the training, but I do want to let you know that ACGME regulates every single residency program. Make sure that they're doing their work. RRC is specific to the specialty. So there will be RRC for surgery, and there will be RRC to family medicine or internal medicine. So the RRC for family medicine has their own rules and regulations, and they make sure that the residents do follow that and the programs do follow that. ABFM is the American Board of Family Medicine, which obviously offer the boards. This is very, very brand new, just started 2 years ago. It is FMCLA, which is Family Medicine Certification Longitudinal Assessment, in which they have, it's kind of a pilot program, and they want to know whether recertification is important or not, because this is not how we learn now these days. It's never a closed book. If I don't know anything, I'll open up to date, and I'll open up something to see how I do this. So FMCLA is a 25-question quarterly evaluation that they do. So you do those questions every quarter, and you keep on doing that. So if you do those questions and you read your wrong answers, the board is satisfied, and you can keep on doing this and not take the recertification exam. This is the kind of the model for FMCLA. This is the program I'm at, and I have kind of put down just briefly how the rotations are done in first year, second year, and third year. So as you can see, this is a discipline that cannot be learned in 3 months or 6 months. It's a discipline that would require you to have a comprehensive knowledge base. You are going to see everyone from womb to tomb. You are going to see everyone, a patient and their family. So the most interesting thing that I have seen when I started practicing, I would have a full day clinic and see 3 patients. But when you start doing a good job, that patient is going to tell the mom and the dad and the grandma and the granddad, and bring the spouse and the kids and say, okay, I like Dr. Rafiq, let's go and see this doctor. And they make you their family doctor. When you know the family dynamics, it becomes so much easier to treat the patient. You know what's going on in their family, and you can better approach those patients. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saira Rafiq. It was quite informative, but it was all American. So, as you know, this workshop is basically to assess the need of family medicine and to bring family medicine to Pakistan. And I think we should hear more about your experience, more about curriculum development here in Pakistan. Our next speaker is going to talk about that. Before that, I'm just going to welcome our chair. He's here, Professor Umar, our VC. He needs no introduction. Welcome, Dr. Umar, for this session. So our next topic is current state of curriculum and training models in Pakistan. And I'll invite Dr. Nasir Shah. He's head of family medicine, University of Health Sciences of Pakistan. Nasir Shah belongs to Pashin district of Balochistan. He did his MBBS from AKU in 1997. Family medicine residency did from AKU. His MCPS, FCPS, MRCGP, FRCGP. He established a community-based family medicine training site in a village near Lahore, which is recognized for FCPS, MD, MPH. That's the only recognized family medicine training site in Punjab. He pioneered distance learning through CMEs for family medicines in Pakistan through DVDs. Also, I think I watched his YouTube channel also he has. He's convener of National Family Medicine Committee of Pakistan. He initiated first master trainers course for family physicians in Lahore with the help of other faculty members. And an interesting thing, he does training for MCPS on weekends. He travels through Punjab, and so from October 2019 till September 2020, he has no weekends vacant. All weekends are booked. Please welcome Dr. Nasir Shah. He is the only full professor in Punjab.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम एवरीवन। अब इतनी इज्जत, इतना प्यार, पता नहीं मैं इसका हक अदा कर सकूंगा भी नहीं कि नहीं। दुआ कीजिए मैं हक अदा कर दूं। So thank you so much for your kind introduction. I've been assigned the task of presenting the family medicine training programs in Pakistan. I would not go into the nitty-gritty of each program because there are so many of them, but I would like to give an overview of what is happening in Pakistan. Where do we all stand? So the first slide, and an interesting thing, this auditorium is very special. People at the back, they can see 100% of the screen. As you come down, every row 5%, 5%. I can empathize with the first row, they can only see 50% of the screen. So then you have to take my words. Believe me, I will explain the bottom of the slides to you. You have to take my words. So the first slide is about the existing programs in Pakistan. In Punjab, there are only 2 programs. One is recognized, one is in the process of recognition. So this is only for the existence. I'm not talking about programs and the doctors in the programs. So existence of the majority of the programs are in Karachi, and Aga Khan University Department of Family Medicine is sort of like a mother of others. So we are the products of Aga Khan University. So we have spread in Pakistan, we are developing further programs. KP Peshawar, Khyber Medical University as a department, Islamabad Shifa, and 2 areas, Balochistan and Gilgit-Baltistan, they do not have any programs. So in total we have 11 programs, 11 departments of family medicine, and 6 of them are recognized, 5 are in the process of recognition. The second slide, and these are updated, I updated them 1 week ago. The second slide talks about different training programs offered. I'm not talking about the residents in the programs or how they are performing, just how many are offered. And the most important program of Pakistan is FCPS. It is present in 5 institutions. The 5 universities offer FCPS. Second major qualification is MD, which is 4 years training. It's again in 4 institutions. 9 institutions offer MCPS residency, and diploma, which is 2 year, again 4 institutions. And there are short courses like 1 year, 6 months courses, and 5 of them offer these programs. So these are structured training programs, sort of structured. So in total, 27 programs are being offered, of family medicine are being offered in Pakistan. Some of them are 4 years, 2 years, and 1 year. Some are FCPS, university based, like MD and DFMs, and some are CBSP based, which is FCPS and MCPS. So this is an interesting fact. The actual intake of residents in these programs or participants. The first row again is for FCPS, which is the premier program of family medicine in Pakistan, 4 years program. Total intake in these institutions is 13 per year. Now, this is an improved figure. Previously, it was not even 13. So 13 fellows are produced every year. This is the intake this year. MD for only at Dow University. MCPS residency, 9 institutions are recognized, only 1 institution is taking residents. Even the nature is also angry. Why they are not taking residents? So MCPS, Indus Hospital is doing a great job. 2 years diploma is offered at Ziauddin and Dow University. And the red box, 800 doctors are registered at Dow University in a certificate course, which is 6 month certificate designed for lady doctors who are not practicing and they are sitting and functioning at home as housewives, and Dow University is doing a good job trying to bring them back into health system through a 6 month course, and they take 4 batches of 200, so it makes 800, a big figure. So in total, the total intake of all family medicine residents in all the program is 935, and the bulk is in short courses. This is a slide which shows how these programs are financed. The good thing about the major programs, I mean FCPS and MD, is that in all major programs, the trainees are paid salary. This is a good thing, because 4 years they have to support their family. And in the 2-year programs, the MCPS has a mixed method. 2 of them I have mentioned, like in where I work, it is called honorary. We neither charge nor give salary. Indus is doing a good job, it pays salary to MCPS doctors. And the shorter courses in which there are more than 800 or doctors or 900 doctors, the short programs, they charge trainees. They don't give salary. Let's come to the faculty. How many teachers are available in Pakistan? Again, updated figure. Let's start by ranks. Like we start with professors. How many professors we have in Pakistan? 7. 5 of them are full-time and 2 are non-full-time. NFT stands for non-full-time. They are working at Aachen, but they are contributing to family medicine. So we include them as 7. Associate professors, 5 throughout Pakistan. And the associate professors are leading departments in Pakistan. They are playing the role of even professors and directors. The main responsibility is on the shoulders of associate professors. Assistant professors are 22 in all the institutions. Each one is doing an excellent job in different institutions in different capacities. And last column is about the senior instructors or senior registrars. So there are 57 people who may have a minor qualification, and there are 15 people who have major qualifications, but they are doing part-time consultants job. Again, they are contributing to different training programs. So in total, there are 57 plus 15 doctors who sorry, either are part-time consultants or they are senior registrars. And these senior registrars, they take the burden of training. Just comparison of the 2 qualifications we call level 3 and level 2. Level 3 is 4-year training based programs, and level 2 is 2 years training program based. So many things are common, that you need an infrastructure, a supervisor, a curriculum, and mandatory workshops, but there are some differences. One is duration is shorter in 2 years course. There is no intermediate module, there is no research. And the thing with the bottom, there's a green, there's a box called grandfather clause or experience-based pathway. It is only available in minor qualifications like DFM, Master or MCPS. The major qualifications, they do not have an experience-based pathway, because the purpose is to produce academicians who will work in universities and colleges. So just to explain to the students, because the doctors already know, experience-based pathway means that if a doctor has 5-year experience of clinical practice, he can appear in the exam after some workshops and trainings. In the word is called grandparenting. The precedents or the examples, 2 major examples in the world are UK and Australia. Both of them took 25 to 30 years to revamp their family medicine training from unstructured to structured, and the main starter was grandparenting. Another important phenomenon, how to use this grandparenting in production of teachers. What is the need of these programs? We talked about 1-year program. They're extremely important because there is a need for these programs. In Pakistan, when people do MBBS, they do house job, and normally they should have postgraduate training, and then they enter into practice. And then they have CME. But unfortunately, in Pakistan, there's no postgraduate training on a larger scale, so people enter into practice directly from house job. So keeping that in mind, we modified the CME. So now the CME is a big series of CME on the syllabus of a postgraduate degree. We use MCPS and MRCGP. So by that token, using CME as a tool, we mobilize family physicians towards post-graduation. So there are two benefits. Family physicians get training and their qualification, which is recognized, and then they establish departments in different institutions. So exam of this experience-based is conducted by a recognized body, which is licensing body. So how this is done? Every program has two components, like Dr. Rafiq said, the core curriculum and the training posts. In experience-based pathway, the core curriculum topics are focused because they already have experience of clinical practice. So this is conducted in this way. Just to give you one example, the extent of this grandfather clause in Pakistan, this is the current of 2020 at College of Physicians and Surgeons, Pakistan. 585 doctors were practicing doctors, they have registered for MCPS. So what we do is, the first level is they do MCPS themselves, and among them we choose the good ones or motivated or those who have a chance as master trainers. Many of master trainers are sitting here and they're the potential teachers of family medicine. They go through 1 year extra faculty training, faculty development programs. So then they will inshallah scale up family medicine to the length and breadth of Pakistan with the help of faculty already that exists. So just to show what is the difference between trainers of a major program and a minor programs. Normally, like medical students, they go through structured 4-year programs, they get FCPS, which is a major qualification, and they become supervisors. Supervisor has two roles. Number one, training. Number two, supervision of the research. Because in 4-year programs in Pakistan, there is research. So they can supervise research and give training. But like master trainers who do MCPS, for them the track is flexible bridging programs like Diploma of Khyber University, the Essentials of Aga Khan University, the MCPS programs. They become trainers. So they can train others as good as other fellows, but they cannot supervise the research. In Pakistan, we need both the supervisors through major qualifications and trainers through the flexible pathways. Because the challenge is too great, we cannot do this through structured programs. This is my last slide. I hope I'm well within time. So this is one of my favorite slides. It's the junction of the sky and the sea, or ocean, horizon and ocean. So I present this that we must have two-pronged approach. The fresh graduates, they must go through structured training programs because they don't have experience. Horizon, the sky is their limit. They are the future, but we should not ignore the depth or the wealth of information experience of practicing doctors. They just need a bit of hand-holding, a guidance, and they do as good as others. So this is my last slide. So we should not compromise one for the other. Take both of the programs all along. Thank you. This is teasing point. I can stir a debate on what is right and what is appropriate. And you can have a full debate, right and appropriate, for 3-4 days together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Nasser. So now the patron is last chair for his comment, and then each of the panelists will come for 2 minutes. And in the meantime, if we can circulate some card decks from the floors, if we can get questions, please. Professor Umar, for your comments, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, Dr. Zahid. I think वो कमेंट बड़े मुश्किल होंगे मेरे लिए, तो मैं एक सिर्फ छोटा सा नरेट करता हूँ उर्दू में, इंग्लिश में मज़ा नहीं आएगा आपको। एक नौकर था किसी बड़े साहब का, तो वो उसने कहा मैं तंग पड़ गया हूँ, उधर बड़ी डांट पड़ती है, कभी खाना पकाना, कभी शू पॉलिश करने, कभी सफाई करना। तो कहा जी मैं जा रहा हूँ। उसने कहा तुम जाओगे तो भूखे मर जाओगे, क्या करोगे? कहता जी मैं फिल्म में काम करूँगा, वो मुझे बड़ा एक्साइटिंग लगता है। तो कहा तुम्हारी मर्जी है। समझाया बुझाया उसको, फिर भी वो चला गया। काफ़ी कोई साल के बाद वो किसी मार्केट में मिल गया साहब को, तो उसने कहा तुम किधर फिर रहे हो? कहते मैं फिल्म में काम कर रहा हूँ। उसने कहा तुम झूठ बोलते थे, इधर भी तुम झूठ बोल रहे हो, तुम किसी फिल्म में काम नहीं कर रहे। उसने कहा जी कमाल है, मैं क्यों झूठ बोलूँगा, आपने सर फलां फिल्म देखी है? उसने कहा बिल्कुल देखी है। कहते मैं उसमें काम कर रहा हूँ। उसने कहा ये तो मैंने नहीं देखा तुम्हें उस फिल्म में। तो कहता आप दोबारा देखें सर। वो दोबारा उन्होंने देखी, उस फिल्म में कोई नहीं था वो। फिर वो की मिल गया। उसने कहा तुम झूठे हो, देखो तुमने दोबारा मेरा 3 घंटे ज़ाया किए, मैंने फिल्म दोबारा देखी और तुम उसमें नहीं थे। उसने कहा ये आप कैसे हो सकते हैं, मैं झूठ बोल नहीं रहा। उसने कहा आपने पूरी फिल्म देखी है सर? कहते पूरी फिल्म देखी है। उसने कहा जी पूरी फिल्म देखी है तो आपने देखा है जब हीरो आ रहा होता है? कहते बिल्कुल गौर से देखा है, हीरो आ रहा होता है, हीरोइन उसका इंतजार कर रही होती है। तो कहते उस हीरो के लिए दरवाज़ा किसने खोला था? तो मैं नहीं था जिसने खोला था। तो डॉक्टर जाहिद आई कांट कमेंट, ये आप ही हीरो हैं और आप ही लोग बारात के साथ आए हुए। मैं तो वो छोटा सा नौकर हूँ जिसने इसलिए दरवाज़ा खोला है। तो इसलिए दिस इज ऑल आई हैव टू से।
Thank you, Professor Umar. Can I ask Dr. Saima, Professor Saima Iqbal, please, for your comment?
Thank you, Dr. Noreen and Dr. Nasir, for wonderful presentations. I will not say much because I think Nasir has really given us the perspective of family medicine and what more needs to be done. So I think we'll be happy to take questions if the audience has any.
Dr. Anab Khan, you want to say something, please?
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for the opportunity. I think it's really important, and I'm glad there's so many students listening to us, that the discipline itself has so much breadth and flexibility, and it can really cater to the needs of whichever community you're serving. So if you see disciplines and the programs going all the way from the US to Pakistan, we really adapt ourselves based on the needs of our community. And I think it's really important for you to understand that this is the only discipline which allows you to do that. So it really is a very good discipline, and I hope we can talk a little more about what the curriculum needs to be, because as we all continue to talk about raising the bar of our family medicine, we as the people who practice it have to make sure that the quality of what we give is right there, right? So as we work on the quality and you have shown the interest, that is the only way we are going to be able to really resolve the needs of our country. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Saira Afzal, please.
Thank you very much for inviting me here. Let me share my experience about curriculum development and training about family medicine. How it starts in King Edward Medical University. Back in 2008, we have to develop this curriculum for family medicine, MD, as well as diploma program. As the student of medical education, and I did my curriculum development course from Johns Hopkins, the first step we did was situational analysis. And what we found was, it was later published in a research, that after doing MBBS, people goes for a house job, and after doing their house job, they start their setups. Unfortunately, that setup, it is not quality controlled. What is the investment in that setup? How the thing would operate, it depends upon the area where that setup is. If it is in a very rich area, it has different services to provide. If it is in a poor slum, or in semi-urban area, or in a rural area, then the services are of different quality. Injections, even drips, they are provided on a very cheap rate, even that rate that is even can't be imagined by the people who are giving the care with infection control and with certain quality control mechanisms. The next thing that we have seen is that the referral system, it was not standardized at all. People are referring the patients who are present in GP clinics in certain setups without having the standardized referral system or information technology at hand. The next important thing is about preventive medicine. In HOG, the hepatitis B and C are being spread by those injections. It was again alarming, and this has given us our next important agenda, that was to do the need assessment. On need assessment, what we found at that time was the continuous medical education was deficient. The second important thing was that specialists in primary care settings, especially in rural health centers, they were the first point of contact, like obstetricians, medical specialists, surgeons. They don't have any referral from basic health units, and that's supposed to be there. The competence-based training was not there, and the assessments, including formative assessments, summative assessments, and 360-degree evaluation was deficient. So we developed a curriculum for our MD program in family medicine. It was approved from Board of Studies, then Board of Faculty, then Syndicate, and then we are very lucky that regulatory bodies, including Higher Education Commission and Pakistan Medical and Dental Council, approved it, and we have launched our first MD program. It was 4 years program, and there were 2 students who passed that MD program. But unfortunately, they both left Pakistan to serve in other country. At that time, we realized this fact that we have to develop a short-term program, not more than 2 years, and we developed our diploma program. And what we are thinking now is to how to develop our certification program. And the certification program shouldn't be more than 1 year, and we have developed it in 2 phases. The first 6 months would be certification in family medicine, and next 6 months would be advanced certification in family medicine. And this is how we are dealing with this training mechanisms. And the most important point here is we are very stringent about the audit mechanisms, especially those students who have been trained in these programs must be have that regular audit after every 3 years. And they have to renew their certification after every 3 years. And that's all. If you have any questions, you are most welcome to ask me as a panelist. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we have some questions. I have some questions from our pre-conference survey. So this one question was like, after World War II, there was so much knowledge about medicine, there was so much advances in medical field. And at that time in Europe and rest of the world, people in America, people were thinking about adding family medicine. There was 4 years of medical undergraduate training and 1 year of house job. At that time, people were thinking 1 year of house job is not enough. After that, people go to practice. Are they ready? They are not ready for to practice, to see patients. So at that time, they started family medicine. We are still doing the same thing in today's age. We still have our undergraduate training, 1 year of house job, and there you go, you can start your practice. What can be done? Can something be changed here?
Okay, I'll start with that. Yes, you are right. At present, what is happening in most medical colleges, you just do your 5 years of training and you are allowed to practice. We need to change that, considering that the way the world is moving, we're now talking about patient safety, we're talking about professional ethics. 5 years is not enough. So what we are now hoping to attract younger graduates to pursue a career in family medicine. And I can say I pursued a career in family medicine because I was exposed to it in my undergraduate. And I think that is one method, that once you start undergraduate training in all medical colleges, we have more than 100, so we can get more of the young people to join family medicine as a specialty.
I think you raise a very valid point, and I think that has been a concern which was raised in all the sessions today, right? That the quality of care that is being provided at the primary care level is not always the best. So why do we go on saying, and why do we as a country allow that to happen? So I think while we as academicians continue to provide quality care, quality training, and try and get more of our medical students to be interested in it, we need the government support. We need the PMDC to bite the bullet one of these days and say, well, after the next 10 years, we will not allow anybody to practice or open a private practice unless you've done at least some kind of structured training in family medicine, right? So if you want to become a family physician, go ahead and train for it just the way you do for internal medicine or for surgery. Why do you think that you don't need to? So we undermine it ourselves as a government, as an institution, and we need to stop doing that.
This question is very relevant, and again I see there is a lot of diversion. When we are talking about public sector, it is totally different, but we are talking about private sector. Most of our general practitioners, they are sitting in the private sector and they are providing the care, healthcare at the private setups. And what I have talked just before this is about those private clinics. The second important thing is our primary healthcare centers like basic health units and rural health centers, they are being served by our graduates who are having certain criteria of induction into their specialization, and they got marks for this. And they are preferring the primary healthcare not because they have some passion for family medicine or for primary healthcare service, because they want those numbers in order to serve in specialized care later on. So this is again a diversion, and we have to be more specific about which type of setting we are talking about.
I think we have touched upon this in the morning sessions. Family medicine is a comprehensive specialty. I just can't swallow the fact that one is ready to serve the people after 5 years of med school and 1 year of house job. So it is the need of the hour that a person who is going out in public and will be taking care of the patients and doing a primary care has to have comprehensive training, structured training to get this thing. And the way to start the interest is having a medical student work with the family medicine, so they see the scope, they see how they interact with the patients and spark the interest. And this is extremely important. Thank you.
Dr. Nasir has to add something.
Thank you so much. This is a fundamental point, why you allow people to practice without training. So the good things are happening now. Things have started, at least in Punjab. In the last 2 weeks, we had various meetings with the secretary. Now it has been approved in Punjab that no doctor will start BHU or IC practice without at least 3 months of intensive in-house induction training, which will have some family medicine, emergency and administrative skills, a combination of 3 different skills, and then they will have follow-up sessions throughout 1 year. And so the government has asked the university to train 2,000 new doctors to be inducted. So we are planning for that. And for those who are already in the system, for that they have suggested monthly sessions to upgrade them, at least give them something. And in return, inshallah, we will demand for 4-year FCPS trainings. The government, inshallah, they will sponsor FCPS trainees and MD trainees in return to our service of the university to the health system. So secretaries are involved. It's a good thing happening in Punjab at least. And so we are also thinking of use that central induction incentive. There are 10 marks for working in a BHU for 1 year. So we'll demand that these marks should be linked to their performance in 1 year, family medicine training and patient care, not just sitting and preparing for USMLE and Part 1. So good things are happening.
Thank you, Professor Nazir. I think next question is also directed towards you. It's not mentioned, but how do we assess the standard of various programs? As you mentioned, there are so many programs in Pakistan. And should there be a standardized certification body who can certify all these programs?
Yes, ideally, there's one country, one program, standard. This is the target that we want to achieve. But in current situations, there are differences like CPSP has its own standards and universities have their own standard. 2 years programs, 4-year program, 1 year, there are differences. So current situation, it may be difficult. Even taking example of CPSP, their FCPS program is a one standard program, and the FCPS of Ziauddin is different from Aga Khan, FMH FCPS is different, and there's slight difference in Indus Hospital. So the correct syllabus may remain the same. Basic minimum standards will be same for everyone, and above that standards, universities and colleges may add additional things, just like in US, if they want to do obstetrics, they can do more. So core of the training programs can be standardized, essential cores, and 100% standardization may be difficult in current situation. And a personal view, no enforcement, like if you want to go on a journey in a desert, and you have two options, one mineral water bottle of 1.5 liter or a bucket full of tap water. In a desert journey, I would take the bucket of tap water instead of one mineral water, because it's the game of survival. Inshallah, with time, when we grow, faculty members increase, we start audits, we start assessments, and we meet and standardize program. Inshallah, in 10 years' time, I see that thing happening. Standard program.
I think when you talk about standards for family medicine in Pakistan, I would use the same standards that are being applied for other specialities in Pakistan. So do we have a standard of education or standards of training for, let's say, surgery or medicine? So, you know, whatever principles are there, we will adopt the same principles.
And I just want to add to that, the reason why the specialty has a little bit of leeway in it is because if you are working in an urban community, if you have a family medicine department in an urban community, the needs of that community are different, right? Versus a department which is in a rural community where you may need to do obstetrics and you may need to do a lot more emergency C-section and get comfortable with it. And so the discipline allows you to have that leeway, and that is really, really important, because that's how it is different from the other very standard, rigid programs. And we appreciate that.
Thank you very much. It is really appreciable that we have differences, we have diversions from the set principles according to our culture, our norms, our social requirements, needs, etc. However, according to the College of Physicians and Surgeons, even they have a method that is called Hofstee method to find out which is the minimum standard that has to be met before giving any fellowship or membership to any candidate. So it is uniform. It is same for any candidate, whether it is from KPK, from Sindh, Balochistan, or from Punjab. However, where there are universities, their MD programs, mostly they are governed by University of Health Sciences in Punjab, in King Edward Medical University in Punjab. However, in KPK and in other provinces, they are separate universities. Each university has to build their own standards and has to make their own stringent mechanisms to control quality. And in the end, the quality control is in the hands of Higher Education Commission. So they make it the audit process, and they make it very clear that minimum standard has to be met at all costs.
So, thank you very much. There is another question. With the current poor health indicators, how can you omit training in family medicine? What they're saying is, there's a question from the floor. What they're saying is, state of health is so poor in Pakistan with the current health indicators. Why the government is not taking action? How can we omit such an essential family medicine training? I think.
It's raining like cats and dogs. School में पढ़ते थे ना, आप सुन भी लिया, देख भी लिया. So if I have understood the question correctly, state of affair is too poor how can family medicine alone improve this standard? If the meaning of question is this, how can only family medicine improve the whole entire health system? Answer is family medicine is one part of primary health care system. The other stakeholders, nurses, allied health sciences, community workers, educators, all have a role to play. Number two, how to do it? We are living in the age of technology. We are underutilizing artificial intelligence and IT based programming, and nobody will listen. हाँ, अल्लाह मियाँ जरा बारिश ऐसा कर दे. So, using technology, blended learning programs, reaching out to people. People have smartphones. Smartphone is the gateway to reaching each and every household, the persons. Using national languages, local languages, we can empower people, we can empower our community workers.
I think next question is for Dr. Noreen Rafiq. So question is, if I am MCPS Family Medicine, what is the pathway to join US Family Medicine residency program, or what is the exemption?
So ये यकीनन किसी स्टूडेंट से क्वेश्चन आया है. बेटा आपको ये कहूँगी कि it is usually mutual. US system, you have to get into the system by doing USMLE. No matter what degree you have, the US does not recognize any other degree but USMLE. So you have to do USMLE, you have to do step 1, step 2 and clinical skills. Then you can enter the residency program and you can do the family medicine residency.
Thank you. And same applies for Canadian residency as well. The next question is for Dr. Saira Afzal. Any reason why you don't have family medicine faculty despite having an MD program since 2009?
A very interesting question, and I love to answer it because we are having visiting faculty on board, and we are very lucky that our Department of Family Medicine, it is going to be established very soon. Under the Dean of Preventive Medicine, we have 12 departments. And we have only 2 functional departments. One is the preventive medicine and the Department of Community Medicine. They are fully functional. However, the Department of Family Medicine, it is next to be established, and we are very lucky to have visiting faculty with us. But this is the question from Higher Education Commission. They don't allow to establish any department with visiting faculty alone. They want full-time professor, associate professor, assistant professors, in a department in order to get it established. And soon we would have the Department of Family Medicine.
The only one thing I'll probably like to add to this conference is the first step to it. So inshallah, King Edward will have a family medicine residency. It's going to be a good one too.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Noreen has already consented to be one of our visiting faculty.
I was just offering that as we graduate our FCPS, we can certainly pass them on to Lahore. We have no problem with that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. There are lots of questions. Please remind me of the time. I'm not sure if we have some, but they are very interesting questions if we can continue for a while. So I think this next question is from some students. So the question is, as a family medicine, if you can have family medicine as a subject in 4th year or final year, that can change things. So family medicine as a subject has to be incorporated in undergraduate curriculum to be recognized. Currently there is no exam for family medicine in undergraduate training. So can it be done, or is there any need?
So can I just start with what has been happening at Al Khan University? We had a section of family medicine in 1993. It became a department in 2002. And there is undergraduate training in family medicine in both year 3 and year 5. So it's a core rotation. It's one of the 6 core rotations. and it's part of our promise to community. So when we talk about community health services and community health sciences, we add family medicine to it. So it's about 20% of our curriculum in gender. And that has made a difference, because even though many of our students may not necessarily take it, but there are alumni sitting over here who are all now family medicine experts and leaders in the country because of it.
बारिश भी कम हो गई. And so, when there is a will, there is a way. Typically, it's to family medicine undergraduate. When the PMDC was alive, PMDC gives a syllabus of MBBS. It does not stop any university from adding family medicine. Universities can add new subjects. Give you one example, behavior science in Punjab. It was introduced by University of Health Sciences, not by PMDC. So if the universities want to add family medicine, they can do it. They cannot. Plus, coming to colleges, and the universities do not stop colleges from adding family medicine in undergraduate. There are so many examples like Shifa, Aga Khan, Fatma Norel, Liaquat National. So if there is a will, they can do it. And the other thing is, when the PMC came, Pakistan Medical Commission, it allowed universities to to take over the charge of programs. So in our university, we got approval from syndicate of adding family medicine in undergraduate. Principal approval has been given. We are working on the final things. The other good thing is, WHO is now working on including family medicine in undergraduate in 22 countries, including Pakistan. The other good thing is the curriculum of family medicine has already been developed for undergraduate in 2 spirals in 3rd year and final year. And it has been handed over to PMDC and WHO. So inshallah, in near future, it will be there, if not at PMDC level, but at universities level. And can lobby with Dr. Umar, at least he can add this as RMU for you people. You like it or not?
Next question is also from a student, and it's related. They're saying that we have preclinical in undergraduate and clinical side. This student wants replacing all the clinical side to family medicine residencies. Is it possible? Just similar, I think, would be the answer.
So the question is, they want
clinical side of undergraduate training to replace with family medicine training.
Okay, so you need to understand that for family medicine to strengthen, you need to have your specialities on board. So ऐसा नहीं हो सकता, we cannot do away with the importance of pediatrics and gynae and medicine and surgery. The challenge for universities and medical colleges will be to get the time from the already overburdened in curriculum overload of 5 years. And that is the biggest challenge that universities are going to face. कि already हमारे students are doing so many subjects, फिर एक ऊपर से आप family medicine भी डाल दें, so it's going to create a burden for the students. So for family medicine to flourish, you need to get the specialities to give some of their time. And at Shifa, we have done that. We have taken some time from community medicine, pediatrics, and obs-gynae, and so we've developed a clerkship for family medicine for our final year students. So just saying we cannot do away with the clinical training, but yes, I think universities should consider, do you need to have a pediatric surgery rotation in the undergraduate curriculum? Maybe, maybe not. So probably because we need to prioritize family medicine for the undergraduates. So let's think about that.
So next question is, I think, also from one of the students. The question is, what is the difference between general medicine and family medicine?
Oh, this is a very commonly asked question. We are different from internists because we are not defined, we are not limited by age. So internists are usually deal with adult medicine, but family physicians, they look at pediatric population up to the geriatric population. So that is one that
I'll add to that. We're really not disease-centered. We are person-centered, right? So the two things that come up with family medicine every time is the comprehensiveness of care that you offer to your patient, but also the continuity of care. So I will not leave you once you get better. I'm not really interested in your disease or you not having a disease, but I'm more interested in you being healthy and well throughout your life.
Yes, as I said in my talk, womb to tomb, from prenatal care to geriatric until you make someone comfort care, you are there every step of their life. This is family medicine. General internal medicine is only adult medicine. Some of them do geriatrics, but none of them do prenatal care or OB-GYN, and none of them do pediatrics. So they are only general internal medicine. So that's the difference between family medicine and general internist.
You want a postgraduate level answer or undergraduate level answer? Undergraduate level answer. So this is the main proper difference of family medicine with others. In simple terms for you medical students, tell me, does the internist see pediatrics? No. Orthopedics? No. Obs-gynae, internal medicine people? No. Do they see surgical patients like hemorrhoids, cholecystitis? No. Do they see eye patients? No. Do they see ENT patients? No. So we take care of 80% problems of all these specialties together, but it's taken care of by one doctor. This is the spectrum. Prevention of disease, health promotion, and curative care, all three are done by family physicians. And life cycle, you said, the whole person, throughout life cycle, we do deliveries, we take care of neonates, we take care of child, adolescent, all. There's so many differences between internal medicine. Internal medicine is only one part of family medicine. Family medicine is much more broader.
Thank you. So I have a next question is from Dr. Mir Aman. He's A&E consultant from UK. The question is, in the curriculum, the one which was discussed, can we add basic life support or advanced life support, ATLS, ACLS, APLS?
It is already part of undergraduate and postgraduate programs. In international standard courses like ACLS, also with obstetrics, PALS, they all are running in Pakistan. All postgraduate programs, FCPS and MD and MS programs, they have these courses, essential courses. BLS is part of every course. Undergraduate also have BLS. So they're already part of this, both at undergraduate and postgraduate level.
I think we can take last question. That was from our online survey. So the question is, how would you like overseas faculty to be involved in developing family medicine in Pakistan, or how can they help? Can they come and teach, or how can they be involved by telemedicine or when we visit as a faculty here?
And just like in war, at battalion or the army people, they are on the front line fighting. And the people are supporting them with armamentarium, food and everything, and they join them just to relieve them. So keeping that in mind, people on the ground in Pakistan who are present here, they continue and the others can chip in with institutions like RMU, Aga Khan and others. So that's, I think, for example, you are coming on holidays, or you can schedule visits, and you can hold workshops. And you can train our teachers, our master trainers. So we will have a lot of teachers, and we can scale up our programs. There are two things coming in mind, others can contribute.
I think I would say that expats can support us by, depending on how much they are willing to do so. Because in our experience, we've had expats come here, but for some reason, they don't stick around long enough to make an impact. those of, who want to stay and develop family medicine. So it's entirely dependent on how willing the expats, how much time they can give, and we are here to, welcome your support.
From the point of view of development of any department, especially in any university, the Department of Family Medicine is essential part of any university. There is a lot of requirement of faculty, and whenever we do situational analysis, how many faculty that is available in Pakistan, the statistics are not very good. So we always rely on those specialists who are working abroad. If they want to come here, yes, there are many positions that are going to be available in almost all the universities in Pakistan.
All I would say that we learn from each other. If I am not able to come back to Pakistan, I am still available through many other sources, online, Skype, live lectures, workshops. So I think there is a lot of things that overseas Pakistanis can contribute. And again, I would repeat, this conference is the first platform that we have started, and hopefully more and more people will join hands with the people who are trying to develop or improve their programs, so we can have a good family medicine setup here.
Thank you, Noreen. So as Apna Merit has started this first conference for family medicine, I'm also a family physician from Canada. So we have lots of family physicians in Canada. They're willing to come, willing to help, whichever way through Apna Merit. In States, Noreen is our lead for family medicine program. I'm co-lead. So we are here to help whatever way, whichever way we can help. Thank you very much. So with that, we'll get closing remarks for this session from Professor Umar. I have lots of questions. We'll answer that later. We don't have time for that. Professor Umar, please.
I think the session will be formally closed by Dr. Naheed Usmani. I'm just saying I'm an intervention gastroenterologist, and sometimes you have to make quick decisions. I think this conference will be, inshallah, the game changer as long as the policy making and awareness and sensitization of all the federal government, provincial governments, HEC, and other stakeholders is considered. I think I'm sure you need three things only to start any of the specialty. To my limited knowledge, you need a curriculum. I'm sure with presence of so many well-learned people, it is not a difficult challenge after this session to make a curriculum, which obviously must be uniform. Once it is a curriculum is there are regulatory bodies which will implement in letter and spirit one uniform curriculum in the whole country. Then comes the institutions. So I think there is a valid criteria to accredit any institution which may be a CPSP related or university related. So once you have a uniform curriculum, uniform standard for the institution where the training happen to be, and trainers or supervisors, you need only three things. I think if we can develop the curriculum of pediatric gastroenterology, intervention cardiology, what is the difficulty here to develop a curriculum and then institute? I think so. To me, things look simplified. And as this conference will conclude, and particularly this session, which was regarding the curriculum, the training modules, as well as the residency programs. So whatever may be it may be university, it may be the College of Physician and Surgeon. What you need is only a uniform curriculum and uniform standard to accredit the center and the trainers. That's it. So we are not entering into a debate who to start, who not to start, where to get the approval or not to get the approval. Only need a curriculum. And I think at the end of the day, today I learned from Dr. Nasser, rest of the panelists, the excellent recommendation, and I think it is already there. So with this, I'm again thankful to the panelists and request Dr. Naheed Usmani to formally close the session. Professor Naheed.
Thank you, Professor Umar. Now I'll call upon Dr. Naheed Usmani, Apna President, for closing remarks for the day.
Thank you, Professor Umar. So, one clarification, we are really not closing for the day. We have 2 breakout sessions that are going to follow this session where we will have 2 small groups each, and there's a coaster that will be coming to pick you up to take you to the breakout session. So one thing, this day has led me to a point where I'm full of humility. We have great warriors. We had champions of family medicine right here in Pakistan who are really doing an amazing job trying to establish. I think in any country, it's not easy to change the culture. And essentially, we are looking at a cultural change, a wave where primary care will dictate how every single child, mother, father, grandfather is going to be taken care of. And it will change the paradigm of healthcare in this country. That is the only way forward. We cannot get over the challenges that the Pakistani population faces without establishing and prioritizing family medicine for the whole country. We as expats are here. Our love for Pakistan is huge. We have the time, the people with expertise like Dr. Nareen Rafiq, Zahid Rafiq, and others in primary care, Dr. Bushra Dar. There are so many of those practitioners who have sacrificed time, energy, and money to come and join us for this conference. And that commitment remains. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, 40% of all Pakistani Americans, physicians, are in primary care. And yes, primary care does, include pediatricians, internists, and family medicine specialists. But each one of us has something to contribute, and we are willing to do that. So thank you so much for participating and everybody's remarks. I think this was a very good start. At the end of our second day, I think we will have a white paper of recommendations that will outline a broad, guideline how to develop family medicine throughout the country and how to expand it and how to build it and how to roll up the numbers so we can meet the demand of 100,000 primary care physicians for this country to meet the numbers. I hope all the young people here are interested in primary care, and we should include it. With Professor Umar, maybe we can make it as part of the undergraduate medical curriculum so that you do get exposed to looking after a whole family in a holistic manner. Thank you. I thank everyone for coming, and please, people who are in the breakout session, there will be a coaster waiting for you to take you across. Thank you.